One of the questions that I'm often asked as part of this Red Gardens project is how much food can you grow? And this is often expressed in terms of yield per area, as in how many kilograms per square meter, or how many pounds per square foot, or even how many tons per acre. But that's the subject of another video I've made. We could also look at it in terms of other resources, including climate, like how much food can you grow within a certain climate, or if certain resources are scarce, such as water or soil fertility. Time is also a critical resource, especially on farms where time can literally be money. In a smaller garden, it's less critical, but can still be important. Some of us put a lot of emphasis on labor-saving methods and tools, perhaps because we're conditioned to think that work is bad, but time can often be a scarce resource. A big part of this Red Gardens project is keeping track of a lot of data, including the amount of time that I spend in each of the family-scale gardens. As one would expect, there is significant difference in the number of hours spent on each method. In total, I spent 102 hours in the intensive garden in the 2017 season. This is a well-established garden, but I still spent a lot of time double digging the beds and making a lot of compost, but not as much as I have in previous seasons. I also spent a lot of time in sowing, transplanting, and caring for all of the plants, as well as in harvesting, but that's to be expected because this is a really productive garden. I spent a lot less time on the extensive garden, with only 72 hours required in the same season. But this garden is set up to be easier, with less time needed for digging and weeding, and less time required for caring for seedlings and transplants. There's also fewer crops, so less time is required for all of the harvesting. The no-dig garden, in comparison, took only 67 hours. And a lot of people like the idea of this method, as it supposedly uses a lot less work. I did find that it took less time to establish the beds and to manage the fertility, but this will likely change as I shift to using more compost as a mulch. Another key reason why this garden took less time was that I didn't give it as much attention as it probably needed, and that resulted in lower yields. The polyculture garden took a lot of time, with 93 hours in total, but that's still less than the intensive garden. This is a relatively new garden, and I spent a fair amount of time at the beginning of the season changing the structure of the beds, but the broadcast sowing and the easy maintenance and care for the plants took a lot less time. Hand weeding, unfortunately, is a labor-intensive process, as is all the harvesting, but there was a lot to harvest. The polytunnel garden, on the other hand, took a lot more time, with 187 hours. I spent a lot of time managing the fertility in this abundant garden, especially with all the foliar feeding I did. There's also a lot more crops, so there's more time needed in all the sowing and transplanting, and a lot of the plants need extra care and attention in the confined space of the polytunnel. Watering is also an issue, but I'm still doing it all by hand, and so this is one area that can definitely be improved by automated systems. Harvesting is by far the most time-consuming task, but it is a most productive garden. But some of the crops that only grow in the polytunnel, such as beans, do take a long time to pick. There are significant differences in the amount of time spent in each of the gardens, but there's also substantial differences in the yields. And I was really surprised when I compared the yields to the amount of time spent, as they matched almost exactly. And when I divided the total kilograms by the total amount of hours spent in each garden, I ended up with 5.0 for the intensive garden, 5.2 for the extensive garden, 5.2 for the no-dig garden, 5.1 for the polyculture garden, and 5.0 for the polytunnel garden. This coherence around 5 kilograms per hour, or about 11 pounds per hour, is really amazing, though it's probably largely coincidental. But there is something behind it, as the more time you spend in a garden, the more your yield will increase. It just kind of makes sense, but it's so interesting to see just such a dramatic representation of this. It's also really convenient that this 5 kilograms per hour is the same as 5 kilograms per square meter that I talked about in the previous video. Both of these are good rules of thumb which are useful and easy to remember. Perhaps 10 pounds per hour or 1 pound per square foot are good approximations for those not using the metric system. A uniting factor of all of this is the diversity of crops that are grown in each of the garden, but some crops take much more work and other crops are much less productive. The simple garden is an example of a very different approach because there's only 4 crops, all of which are easy to manage, high yielding, and can be harvested all at once. The garden is also designed to be much simpler, with the help of sheet composting and a ground cover to manage all of the beds. I'm not surprised that this simple garden took only 42 hours, including all the time I spent at the beginning of the season establishing the beds. All the other tasks took much less time, but the higher yields didn't follow the trend of the other gardens. Using the same formula, I end up with 12.4 kilograms per hour, which reflects the marginally higher yields and less than half the work. This garden will take much less time in the 2018 season, so I expect much higher productivity, perhaps as high as 20 kilograms per hour. Compared to 5 kilograms per hour, this garden could be almost 4 times as productive, and in a league of its own, but it's designed to be that way. Most of us want a greater range of vegetables, so we need to accept that there's going to be more work involved. But if you didn't mind the limited diet and had very little time, then this might be the best method for you. Of course, there are a lot of labor-saving options, and this is a big focus of a lot of social media posts. I'm not afraid of hard work, but I do like to be efficient with what I do. But within the context of this Red Gardens project, I think it's important to figure out how long things actually take, and to not be always focused on finding the fastest and easiest way to do everything. A good example of this is watering in the polytunnel garden. Up until now, I've been watering by hand instead of installing automated watering systems, because I wanted to see how much time it would take so that I could figure out how much time I could actually save. This 5 kilogram per hour guideline is likely to change as each garden develops and becomes more productive, and as I become more skilled and efficient as a grower. I would expect it to increase to 6 or maybe even 7 kilograms per hour. It will be interesting to see if some gardens become more productive than others as this project develops, but I don't expect there to be a lot of divergence except for the simple garden, of course. For now, 5 kilograms per hour is a good guide, as is 5 kilograms per square meter, in this context of climate and scale of production at least.
This is the last video in a series summarising the gardens and the 2017 growing season. We're now heading into a new season of exploration, growth and filming. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and share, and if you want to support the project, check out the Patreon link here or down in the description. Most importantly, thank you for watching.